Hello, and welcome to The Grind. The Grind is a cannabis podcast where we spend some time having a sesh with all of our friends and talk about what's going on in the industry. So today is a discussion specifically on the New York market right now and what licensees are required to submit and prepare for their pre-operational inspection to the OCM. I'm Brittany Melville from Forte Operations. We provide SOPs, training, and consulting services to expedite your store opening. And today we are excited to have special guest Cal from Solink. So why don't you give us a little bit about your background, what brought you into cannabis, and a little bit about Solink?
Sure. It's a bit of a journey. To keep it short, basically, I used to work with a company in a similar space to Solink. It was a tech startup that was sort of a sister company to Solink. This was years ago. I jumped around. I did a few things since then, but I had a number of connections within Solink that I maintained over the years. And I continued to hear a lot about what Solink was doing over the past 3 or 4 years. And I found what they did really, really interesting, like really neat and particularly useful for business owners. So, just in an absolute nutshell, Solink's on the security side of things and loss prevention. But what we do is we use the security infrastructure as a tool for operations. So, I've run a couple businesses in the past, primarily in construction. I've worked in a bunch of different areas as well. But it really resonated with me that Solink was doing something that I saw value in for a business owner, not just in terms of security, but also in terms of the operational side of things, which I'm sure we will get into over the podcast. So I found a lot of interest in that through connections that I'd maintained. I met with the Solink team, and now I've been doing this for a little over a year now with Solink, working a number of different territories.
Wonderful. And what markets are Solink currently in?
Really any legal, medical, or recreational state or province. So we're in Canada and the US. About 75% of our business comes through the US. Solink also works in really any brick and mortar business. Restaurants represent a large market, general retail organizations from, individual mom and pop shops all the way up to very large organizations with 10,000 plus locations. So Solink's really across the board, and we're being used for whether it's security alarms or surveillance monitoring, or again, that operational loss prevention side of things.
And Shankar, CAURD, give us a little bit of background about you guys and the team.
Okay. So, thanks, Brittany. CAURD was a very interesting chapter because about 6-7 years ago, Eric was a client when I was running the studio, and at a time where cannabis was restricted to about 2-3 states in the US, Eric had the vision. Eric is founder and CEO of CAURD, now what it's called CAURD. It used to be called Geek Tech before. It was a traditional IT managed services team, but Eric saw something about cannabis, and he was really talking about cybersecurity and how things need to be tightened up when it actually goes legal or recreational. And so we actually did some work for Eric. We actually put some animated videos, and I was, as a part of the research, and I was reading that, I was so much into George Carlin, and so we had Eric and Carlin. I had kind of very similar vision. We got that video out. But 2-3 years later, Eric was trying to launch CAURD off the block because he realized that Geek Tech, being a business that took care of, it worked in not-for-profits, it works in universities, it worked with the medical centers, and a lot of different businesses. He wanted a unique cannabis proposition. So CAURD was launched, and at the time, Eric was looking for a salesperson. This 3 years ago. So I've been with CAURD since then. We started off doing a lot of things, starting with applications, setting up IT for for retail businesses, for cultivation, for processing and manufacturing, and of course looking at every aspect. Like we had an e-commerce setup. Today, these are 3 different businesses. CAURD focuses specifically on getting dispensaries off the ground and working. We take care of their IT, we take care of their security, and soup to nuts, like we call it in New York. So that's what we do. Soup to nuts, everything that you need, peace of mind, we get you started.
And just for our listeners, so you are aware, today we will be taking a deep dive into the New York market, specifically for the dispensaries and the pre-op inspection requirements. Alrighty, so guys, I know this environment in New York is ever changing, ever evolving. It seems week over week, things are changing. Which, I mean, that's the nature of a emerging market, especially when the regulations haven't been finally released. So I know both of you and your companies, as well as Forte, have been involved in some of these first round of applicants that were lucky enough to have first crack and open. So the first requirement on the pre-op inspection from the OCM is the floor plan requirement. I feel like this is probably a little bit more of a Shankar question. Can you walk me through the requirements of the floor plan submission that the licensees are required to hand in?
Yeah, I mean, as a part of the delivery checklist before an inspector comes in, and even this goes even when a user is trying to actually apply for a license, he kind of needs to, he requires a floor plan of a space. He needs to identify a space. Within the space, he needs to identify each and every location of every room. So where is the vault? Where is my sales floor? Where are going to be my bathrooms? Where is going to be my check-in desk? All these needs to be identified. From there on, you need to segregate how the access is going to flow. So in sort of common parlance, we try and segregate the floor plans into three parts. The public access, where everybody can actually come in, which is up and until the check-in desk, right? Then you have the private access. This is to the sales floor. People who have checked in who are, say, 21 years or over, or 18 years over, depending on the location. And then they walk into the sales floor, but they cannot go to the back of the house, which is basically what we call as the employee access. And within employee access, there could be certain people who are not allowed into the vault in certain locations within, right? We call it restricted access. So having that segregation is very important. And how do you segregate that? You segregate by marking access controls on the doors. So you have physical access controls, whether it's electronic, whether it's lock-based, doesn't matter. You're creating that access. You see the flow, how the customer comes in, how the customer goes out. Then the other aspect is surveillance. Where are the cameras going to be? Allowing people to sort of mark cameras is very, very important. You need to have camera coverage of wherever cannabis is moving, on all the ingresses and egresses as doors. And you also need to have adequate coverage for cameras in front of the point of sales and the vault. This is something that we can actually do for it. So that sort of marks the floor plan. So long story short, you need to know what the space looks like, what each room is functioning, how the access controls are, and how the camera is actually marked. You also actually do mark certain amount of alarms and panic buttons. That sort of changes per regulations, but again, it's just a very good practice to also understand what your security system is also going to be. So the whole floor plan will sort of drive into what your security system is going to look like eventually.
And hats off. Your team has really supported me with free mock-ups of camera floor plans. So it's been super helpful for all of us. Amazing. Okay, Cal. So the second requirement, which is Exhibit B on the pre-op inspection list, requires a full update and verification that the security system is ready to go. And from my previous conversations, there's a lot of confusion between like a security software and the alarm system. So can you walk through what those requirements are from a licensee?
Yeah, definitely. So just off the top, the basic idea for a licensee in New York in terms of security is you're going to need a monitored security system. You're going to need surveillance cameras, basically a full camera system that meets a number of requirements. And then, like Shankar mentioned, the access control side of things. So those are the three main boxes that you need to tick. In terms of managed security, so there are a number of ways to go about having a security system. There are two primary sort of contrasting options that you have. Okay, one option is going to be a traditional, more old school panel-based system, which includes motion sensors in rooms and sensors on doors and windows. The way that these security systems work is if someone tries to enter the building, it'll set off an alert either at the door or a window or those motion sensors. there's generally a grace period after that alert is sent off for someone to come in the building and input a code, as you might have done maybe at your home or at a business in the past. And then after that grace period, an alert is sent to a monitoring company, which then will call the police and say, there's an alert at this particular business. It's something that, that you should attend to. That's the basic idea of what an alarm system looks like, particularly an older alarm system. Now, it's important to note, with a system like that, the statistics from the police are that 98 to 99% of the alerts that come from these systems end up being false alerts. That's maybe a door was someone tried to pull on a door and didn't actually open it, but it created an alert, or there was some motion within the building that wasn't relevant to there being an alarm and it created an alert. So the police receive a ton of these alerts. Generally, the first couple of false alarms that happen with a business, they're free for the police to show up, but eventually you start getting charged for those false alerts. So this is your traditional panel-based system, again, with sensors on your doors and windows and motion sensors within the business. Now, another form of alarm system, and this is frankly what we provide at Solink, is video alarm monitoring. So you can also have the option of using your cameras as motion sensors that provide security for the business. So if someone tries to get in the building, or if somehow they've already gotten into the building, the cameras are monitoring for changes in pixels. So essentially just changes on the camera if you're not familiar with that technology. So someone moves into a camera frame. This is movement that we're now going to be made aware of. Humans sitting in front of a screen are going to receive an alert that says there's movement at this business that there shouldn't be. Begin watching this footage. So in near real time, an individual is now monitoring and watching your actual business, and they're contacting the police if there's a threat to person or property. So they now see a video feed. They aren't getting an alert that's saying something might be happening. They're watching video of the business, and then they're contacting the police, human on the phone, saying, I'm watching this business, there's a break-in in progress, and I'm sending you video evidence of that crime in progress. The police now have verification that there is actually 100% an alert on the property, and they're going to send someone to obviously meet that need much quicker because it's not likely to be a false alarm. It's verified that there's actually someone breaking in. So to give you a little breakdown on the technologies that are available, both of these are monitored security systems. And you're going to need one of those to tick that box. Someone needs to be monitoring that system to meet that first level of compliance.
Yeah, and I also believe as a part of this whole checklist, you need to actually get a certification or a note from the monitoring station to actually say that we are monitoring your facility. So in traditional way, a local company will provide that, and Solink is going to provide that and saying that, hey, we are doing the monitoring service, which is an important part of the delivery.
Right. So you need a letter from the security systems company confirming the monitoring system is up and ready and continuing to go with the camera retention, which is how long?
60
you
days.
need screenshots. Awesome. And then also from all the cameras installed in the entire location that include like the timestamp embedded on each image. So you can't just have a letter saying we intend to install these cameras. It literally has to physically show that they are recording and ready to go with timestamps.
I mean, that's a great point because I have a lot of conversations with prospects and clients to be, and they say that, hey, just give me a floor plan. I need to apply for inspection. And I just reiterate saying that the store has to be ready. The cameras have to be functioning, and you need to show them actual images of cameras recording your location. So it's not just submitting these documents. You need to have your store lit operationally ready.
Definitely. And the other important thing that I feel people are missing is you must submit all of these items to the OCM at minimum 1 week before your inspection so that they have the time to review it before they come to your store. So just to add on that second point there, what I've been finding is, a key, I've worked and managed dispensaries for years, and the best thing about Solink is how simple the platform is to use. In traditional retail, where product is actually on the floor, the level of shrink is a lot higher. In cannabis retail right now, specifically in New York, you can't have self-shopping such as like in California, where you can have some product on the floor and customers can come and packaging. So luckily, shrink is like a lot lower in New York right now, or in any state or province that has cannabis locked in a vault behind you, because the product just isn't on the floor. However, a huge area of shrink is employee accidents. So, for example, just giving up the wrong product. A lot of the times, like a 1 gram pre-roll will be in the same package as like a 3-pack pre-roll, and they'll be merchandise beside each other in the back of house, and they look identical. So it's easier to give incorrect item that way, because all like packaging is extremely similar if it's within the same brand. So for me as a store manager, it was so simple to use Solink and zoom in on where we had the product in the back of house and be able to cross-reference with invoices on the receipt, and we sync up our point of sale so that it's all synced up with Solink, and it makes like an hour long grueling process of going through footage. You can do it within like minutes. So that in itself is super supportive for an owner operator. Just the ease of looking into discrepancies, which is super important because it's your money there. So yeah, awesome. Well, thank you guys for that. So number 3, the third thing you need for your pre-op inspection is the initial inventory list. None of us would really help with this. This is just a comprehensive list of the suppliers you've been engaging in and corresponding with. So number 4, the Exhibit D requirement from the OCM is to prove that you have a compliant point of sale and inventory tracking service ready to go, and you do need to prove that this is ready and set up. So what you are going to have to do is confirm that all of your inventory and sales systems are installed and operational. You also have to have a sample customer receipt. Obviously, you haven't performed a transaction yet, so you would just reach out to your client success manager, your onboarding manager, anyone from the point of sale company, and they'll send you over a example of a customer receipt. At Forte, we also have these too. And then the last thing you will need to do is demonstrate your inventory report that shows full traceability of all the products. So what you're selling, what the gram size is, what the name is. The issue we were experiencing a couple weeks ago was this was an extremely manual form from the OCM that licensees were having to input all of their transactions line by line on their own. Thankfully, most of the point of sale companies that we have been working have already updated the report, so you can select your specific time frame and export your report at the end of the week, because you are required to submit these sales reports weekly, and you send that right off to the OCM. So it's an extremely simple process. It took me 5 minutes. So that's what you'll have to do for the point of sale inventory tracking. And in our experience, it is a good idea to get those conversations going right from the get-go, because different point of sale companies have different offerings that may be more enticing to you. And as a business, it is obviously extremely important. That's how you will be receiving money and taking through your transactions, but also tracking your inventory. All right, so number 5 is the signage requirements. This is something we've been supporting with a little bit also. So essentially you just need to submit clear color photos of all of the signage inside and outside the store. So that includes your store name signage. It also includes any marketing collateral you may have, and your mandatory just like labor posters and whatnot. So any and all signage that you intend to have displayed, also the required signage in terms of like the cannabis safety requirements, you have to follow that. Easy peasy. The next is your hemp or CBD license. So any licensees that are intending to sell CBD or hemp products, you have to submit that additional license. And the 7th area is crowd control. So this is where Forte has supported. We've had a couple of these SOPs already approved by the OCM. So you essentially have to prove that you have a plan put in place for crowd control measures. So, for example, do you have security guards? How many? What times are they working? Where are they located? Where are they going to be stationed? Are they going to receive training? If so, what kind of training? what does your ID process look like? How many people are being ID'd at the store? Are you having a secondary ID station where your employees are also IDing? In addition to that, you would want to also note if you're going to have any line control methods such as stanchions internally or externally, if you're going to streamline processes in store with kiosks, with ATMs, how many ATMs, if you're going to have extra lineups to expedite processes, for example, your prepaid pickups. What if they're a cash pickup? What if they're a prepaid Dutchie pickup? So all of those things we've built out and can walk you through what we would just suggest in terms of a layout and a plan of attack, because it's really easy for a store to go from like 0 customers to 25 customers in the store right away, and staff just be running around like chickens with their heads cut off. So having clear roles with every single person in the store and them able to be trained to flex onto wherever the traffic is going is also critical. So having a strong training program in there is super helpful. And having a strong network, so that when you do get busy, your sales are still going through and you're not having to put the point of sale companies tethering off of your own because Drake has set your store up for success. The next item that the OCM will be looking to ensure you are prepared for is delivery. So even if you aren't intending to offer delivery right off the hop when you open, you still will need to submit any SOPs for future delivery. So you have to clarify if you have the intent delivery, yes or no, and when will the services be offered day one, or if not, when will they be offered? And you need a detailed SOP outlining your exact process for this. So if anybody doesn't know what an SOP is, it's a standard operating procedure. Sometimes they call them operating plans. Sometimes they just call them training documents. But essentially, it's a rule book, a guide, step by step, outlining exactly what you do in every scenario. We also customize stores to your tech stack. So if you're using Drop for your dispatching, if you're using OnFleet for your dispatching, whoever you're using for your point of sale, for your e-commerce, for your payment, we customize that and add in any of your hours, plus your, I don't know if there's a requirement for them to have a certain uniform on. We go through those details for you in your SOP that you'll submit to the OCM, which ours actually have been approved by the OCM. All right. Well, that actually brings us to the last item that at this very moment the state has been requiring for the inspection. Keep in mind, we did have a licensee have an inspection 1 week, and the next week another client have an inspection, and the requirements changed within the span of a week. So it is important that you're keeping track on the evolving state of this market, because it seems like things are a little volatile at times. So guys, I think we have time for a couple more questions here. I'm just curious to know what both of you have been experiencing in terms of just misconceptions or general frequent questions you're receiving from licensees that are new to this industry and new to this world of legal dispensaries, and how you're navigating supporting them.
Yeah, I don't mind jumping in here. I'll give you a bit of a brief idea in terms of the security side of things. So I spoke about this a little bit earlier, where we have essentially 3 requirements: monitored security system, your camera surveillance system, and then some form of access control. Let's just get the access control out of the way right away. In terms of the OCM requirements, you read the requirements, you need to be able to limit access to certain rooms and make it so that people can't get into certain areas. Now, we work with a number of different states, and generally when we interpret this from the perspective of having worked with other states, you could probably get away with like locks and keys on doors, or a mechanical combination lock, something like that, if you take the wording for what it says within the requirements very literally, but it is somewhat open for interpretation. In working with a number of different licensees, what's up?
Sorry, I have a question on that point you just made. and I'm sure everyone's going to ask this question because I walked into a store that was open in Buffalo, and you know how in Ontario you have to have your floor separated to your back of house, and it has to be locked. Like you can't just have a regular door handle. They didn't even have a lock on the door at all, and anybody could just walk in, like any employee. You didn't have to have a tap card or anything, and it seemed to have been approved. They've been operational for a week or two. So how have you been running into there?
So there are certain rooms that are required to have access controlled, right? So if we look at just general preventing access to the building in general, the surveillance room or where the IT equipment is held, definitely need access there. On the vault as well, it can't be something that people can just walk into. I believe if there's a fulfillment space, I'm not sure. I'd have to review that. But essentially, there are probably about 5 different rooms within the facility that should have some form of access control on them. And the point, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry.
Okay. No, I thought you had a point. The point that I wanted to make is in our experience in working with New York, we are probably working with maybe 20 different licensees today, of which, at least a handful are currently, installing and moving forward with their sites. Every single one of them has gone with a form of actual access control that goes beyond locks and keys and have actual fobs, or they're using cell phones to get through doorways. So we also had an event where we worked with a licensee that was working with DASNY, and DASNY did request access control as well. Now, DASNY is not the OCM, but my point is, if you read the OCM's guidelines for retail, there's nothing that it explicitly says you need a specific type of access control system. However, every single person we've worked with and DASNY have gone with a specific access control system. So it's something to keep in mind, that you likely will want to look into that as a portion of your building. Okay. Now, aside from access control, because that's something we work with, Shankar and Curate on sourcing for, that particular part of the project. When it comes to the cameras and the alarms, that's very much where we excel. So for the camera system, generally people are approaching this and they say, okay, I need a certain number of cameras. And to dumb it down, you need cameras everywhere there's cash or cannabis, and you need to be able to identify individuals, certain identification of individuals as they are entering or exiting the facility and at the point of sales. All right, this can mean a number of different things, but you need cameras essentially everywhere within your shop. The cameras can be a whole bunch of different types of cameras, right? People sometimes come to us and say, can I pick up a camera from like a local store? Can I install those cameras? You have to tick a number of boxes that are required for compliance. There have to be, again, like we discussed before, timestamps, time and date. You have to be able to provide remote access to your camera system. You have to be able to easily share video, because it's expected that when you're requested to share video, you can do it in a very, with a quick turnaround. So there are a number of requirements in terms of how you're going to be using that system and what the system needs to meet. So they don't necessarily have to be particularly costly, but you need to be aware of what those requirements are, and you can't just pick up any old cameras and place them on the walls and it's going to be compliant. There are a number of little pieces that you have to be aware of, and that's something that we encounter and that we generally educate people on. So they can go with us or they can go with someone else, but they're just aware of, what they're going to need.
And for listeners who maybe don't have experience with if and when you'd be required to export footage, for example, let's say that there was a theft or an emergency situation, a customer was in the store, was mentally unwell, or there was a break-in, you would be required to submit that footage to the authorities if you're going to make a police report. And in the back of Solink, to quickly export that report and flip it on over is the simplest streamlined process. I've done it, honestly, 20 plus times.
Yeah, we appreciate that. And I think it's important to highlight just in general, the frequency at which people use their camera system in a retail environment, not even necessarily considering cannabis, but you're just running a store. There are sort of reactive situations where I need to keep footage of a particular transaction. Someone came in intoxicated. I need to keep a record of that. something happened outside of my store and the police requested footage of something that happened outside the store, I'm going to provide that to the police because I want to build that relationship with law enforcement, local law enforcement. And then, of course, there's doing audits within your business and saying, hey, maybe I'm out of town for some period of time, or I'm at another shop. I run multiple shops. I want to be able to hop on my phone and see what's going on. Are my employees following those SOPs, right? How does the shop look? Is everything organized the way that it's supposed to be? I understood that a particular employee might have been behaving, suboptimally with people coming in the door. I can quickly jump on my camera system and see what's going on. So I really encourage people not to think of the camera system as something reactive that just sits in place, as it has historically been something that's exclusively for security. It's very much a tool that allows you to pop your head in the ceiling at any time and verify that everything's working the way that it should, and to make sure that over time you're not losing out on customers who aren't having the experience they want. Maybe a customer comes in and says, hey, this exchange didn't happen the way that I wanted it to. I left without getting the right product or whatever it is. You can say, okay, no problem. I'm going to verify this. I can hop on my phone and I can quickly, within less than 30 seconds, find exactly what they're talking about, verify what happened, to make sure that, again, everybody's following procedure and your customers are having the best experience possible. So just keeping an open mind to, this is not a reactive system that you're only going to use in case of an emergency, or that's only going to capture someone as they break in. It's something that you should be using on, at a minimum, a weekly basis, as a tool to save you time in managing and making your business as efficient as possible. So really consider the system that you go with, because some are very cumbersome, some might be cheap up front and really tick certain boxes, but they're not actually going to deliver you value over time. And that's largely what we try to do with Solink. And worst case, if we get to have a chance to communicate and talk about what your objectives are, we can at least point you in the right direction to make sure that these are things you're taking into consideration you can benefit from.
Okay, so we have a lot of people who actually come in who've seen the Solink system, they love it. And of course, we help them sort of optimize where the cameras are going to go and everything comes in. But the hardest point of conversation is to establish and show them what this network means, because you mentioned network once. And I just want to spend some time on that, because one, this is not explicitly said in a delivery checklist. So does this mean that you don't need a network, or can you actually run? So if you were to just say, I got internet, I got a router that's sitting in my IT room, can I run my POS on Wi-Fi? Yes, you can. But will you be able to run it successfully, continuously, without any problems? What if you have a crowd of 20 people coming in, and then your computer or your tablet is trying to connect your printer all the time, every time, because the internet just switches addresses? So there is a way to actually have all these devices speak to each other, okay, continuously, secure them, segregate them, and that's what the network is. And that's an important aspect of it. And a lot of people also miss out cybersecurity, like at the heart of having your endpoint device protected. Imagine you have a guest access, right? And if you don't have the basic network configuration, someone with a cell phone can tap into your access point, which is a guest access point, then connect your POS if they want to. They can just basically do a simple DDoS attack. So there's a lot of considerations that is not explicitly written. But if you were to actually go for insurances, because things that's going to save you when something goes drift, right? They start asking these questions. Do you actually have a firewall? Do you actually have a company that's actually managing these things? Have you segregated your point of sales, your security systems, your office access? So there are a few things that it's not written explicitly that you need to do. And that's something that needs to be considered into the cost component. It's not expensive, but it makes your life so much easier. But imagine just not being able to transact for 30 minutes because you're figuring out why a printer and scanner is not connecting. Just setting this up, spending that extra $2-3 grand before is going to help you go a long way. It's not just basically getting an internet. So something to think about. And there's a ton of these options, right? There's so many point of sales, there's so many cameras, and there's so many options. And trying to coalesce should not be your headache. I mean, we've got teams like Curate, and what we do, and a lot of companies can help you doing that, is trying to distill what is the right stack. That's why we call telling you what is the right stack, what is the most optimized stack, and what you need to invest to get started. I always say that as well. There's so many things that you can do, and you can plan this before. Suppose you're thinking of having 6 point of sales, and you want to have 4 televisions, right? And you don't need to start with 6 points of sales and 4 televisions. You can start off with 2 points of sales. How do you future-proof yourself? That's where we come in. We help you, like, okay, set your cables in. You put your wall, before you get your drywalls up, keep your cabling set up for additional televisions, additional point of sales. But once you start operating and you want to expand, okay, your network service provider should be able to think about your future, think about your future expansion and contraction as it happens, like seamlessly. And those are things, those are questions that you want to ask, those are questions that you want to consider when you're making this to go. Because I meet a lot of people and say, I want 35 point of sales. And I've met a few recently, and New York and outside. And I said, fantastic, we can do that. But do you want to start with 35?
And the point of sale companies, some of them might say, yes, let's go with
Yes.
30 sales.
Yeah.
So,
And Shankar, sorry, if I could add on just a little bit there. I think something that you're kind of touching on too, in terms of longevity and being successful in the long run, as we've seen, like we've all had the ability to see multiple markets at once unfold. We've been working, all across North America, and it's kind of interesting when you travel between states. It's like you're in a time machine in terms of what's happening with cannabis. But really considering the companies that are the most successful down the road, it really comes down to largely the customer experience, right? People want to go to a shop where every single time I've come, I've had a great experience with the employees. The technology has worked flawlessly. Obviously, the product selection is great. The layout of the store is great. And just keeping these things in mind in terms of staying competitive in the long run, right? In the short term, of course, it's in terms of supply and demand, there are very few shops. They all do very well. But in the long run, it comes down to who's running the best business, right? And if you work with experts in these spaces, you're really going to end up spending a lot less in the long run because of the success you'll have from having that foundation of experience through people like Shankar, who can set up your system to make sure that just these little errors won't happen over time, right? Your network is going to work flawlessly. Your system's not going to go down. Something like Solink or a comparable product where we can use our surveillance system to make sure that everything's operating the way it needs to, so that over time, customers come to expect a standard from your business that is not being upheld at other businesses. And I think that in like sort of the gold rush stage of any state, it's easy to overlook that and say, hey, I can get away with pretty much whatever I want. Very important to focus on how you're setting yourself up for very long-term success from the beginning. Not necessarily meaning you have to invest in certain things. You don't have to invest in certain things. There's a lot of things you won't need to invest in that people will say you do, but there are certain things that absolutely will be critical to that customer experience. And that is really from my experience, at least in communicating with people who've been around for 5 to 10 years, the ones who are doing well are the ones who people want to go to their shop. There's a shop that's closer to them, but they want to travel slightly further to go to this shop because of the experience that they have on a regular basis. And that experience comes from the infrastructure that you build right off the bat. So I think that, I don't know, that's a really critical point, and Shankar kind of touched on it. I really wanted to delve into it too, because as someone who's putting your livelihood on the line to start up a business, I think that's really the most critical element there to consider.
That was amazing points from both of you. And I think it's safe to say all three of us here speaking are extremely passionate about what we do, this industry, and the services we provide. I collectively, between the three of us, we've probably opened a couple hundred stores. So I mean, it's awesome that you'll probably get a good amount of insight from us just sharing from over the years opening locations, and we'd love to just talk shop, right off the hop. That's what we're here to support and educate from our experience. So vetting your partners and working with reliable, trusting people that deliver amazing customer service is what I love about this industry. You guys have been phenomenal along the way these last couple of years, and I'm so grateful for all the relationships we've built and the people we've supported together, because you guys are both a good crew. Well, what's next? What's coming down the pipe? What conferences are we all going to?
Well, in New York, we've got Albany coming up pretty shortly. I believe that's later part of September. I'd have to verify. We're also going to be in Long Island as well. There's an event in Long Island that we're heading to. We're going there with Curate as well. And so we'll be on a panel there talking about something similar to what we were talking about here. So Gonna be at 2 shows over the next month and a bit.
I think curators on the road whole of September. I don't think Munir, the other my colleague, he's going to be on the road, literally hitting every conference. I don't think he's at work. He's going to be in LA at all. It looks like a couple of busy months leading up to MJBiz for us.
Yeah, I think Munir and I are both going to NECAN in Jersey and then driving over to Long Island, Cal. I think I'm tagging along on that meeting because we're meeting a couple clients in Manhattan after. So I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot of each other over the next couple of months.
Be in New Jersey too, so for sure.
Thank you so much for listening into this episode of The Grind. If you have any additional questions, please pop them in the questions below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to hear more.